Hey everyone, thanks for joining us at the Marketing Share podcast. I'm Alec and I'm here with my host, Barb. Hello, Barb.
Hey, Alec, how's it going?
I'm good. I'm glad to be back in studio with you. We're talking with a guest today who is someone you've worked with. I know you're super excited about having her on the show. Her name is Haley, and the topic is a good one, sales enablement, right?
Right. I mean, what marketing organization isn't in service of sales today,
Yeah,
huh?
right. I mean, that is the thing. As a marketer, we know sales is, we're here to support sales. So let's talk about that term sales enablement really just for a moment, though, because when I hear the term sales enablement, I run right away towards like, oh, it's all the stuff like training and it's like making sure the salespeople have what they need. But really, when I stop to think about it, sales enablement is really just good marketing. We use that phrase before, and I know you use that before. So like, is that how you're approaching this too? Is it just another way of saying really good marketing?
Yeah, I think especially when we talk about the journey of a customer, right?
Yeah.
Are we making the journey and every touch point along the way excellent for that customer? And are we guiding that customer into a relationship with us, right? That's
Yeah.
what sales enablement's all about. And some folks have it in the marketing organization, some folks have it in the sales or SDR organization, what have you. But I think if you think about it just in that way, that it is in service of trying to make a great touch point across every part of that customer journey and get them into conversation and eventually become a customer. That's the right way to think of it. And we don't need to define exactly, what tactics, but
Yeah. Okay. But
yeah,
doing it in a way to help your sales team or your salesperson be in that seat to be able to do all of that, right? To facilitate that.
sure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about today's guest, Haley
Yeah.
Exum. I had done a stint with her through some of our work before, and she's working at a great company called MD Revolution. Outstanding company, outstanding products. And it's a software and it's a healthcare organization. She's got a great background for that. But what I love about Haley in this space is, she's one of those folks that will roll up her sleeves and get her done, which I personally love, right? And, part of this organization was about, how can we make sales more successful? And Haley jumped in and came from a background of doing a lot of event work and some marketing, and then really just took this whole sales enablement and touch points with customers to a whole new level.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk to Haley. I'm excited to hear her story and see what we can find out from her.
Yeah. And sneak preview, the stats are amazing that she's achieved. So let's get started.
All right.
Hey, everybody. Barb from the Marketing Share podcast and my co-host, Alec Cheung.
Hello, Barb.
Hello. Today, we're talking to an awesome person and an awesome topic around sales enablement, which is on everyone's mind right now, especially at the end of the year. We're wrapping it up, and people are really trying to be more efficient around sales enablement and how we transfer the skill set around getting people to start a conversation with us and translating that into business. So today, we've got Haley Exum with us. Hey, Haley.
Hi.
Haley, tell us a little bit about your career journey. I mean, I know we have worked together a little bit at the fabulous MD Revolution that's doing some amazing things in the remote care area. But just talk a little bit about your career journey. I know you're a full stack marketer, but today we're going to kind of guide into the conversation around sales enablement.
Yeah. So sales enablement is relatively newer as a focus in my career. I would say about the last year and a half. Primarily because of a business need at MD Revolution. But healthcare has always been central to my life since day one. Both of my parents were traveling nurses that took contract assignments all over the country. So something that I think has really enabled me to have a heightened level of adaptability in my career. And even my early educational pursuits, I was on a pre-med track until the 11th hour. And then a very brief stint with my undergraduate education in hospitality management. I quickly realized that industry was not going to give me kind of the long-term purpose that I needed. So I went back to school for my master's in healthcare administration. I built a hyper niche healthcare staffing agency that recruited mental health professionals for correctional facilities. While having my first child, a lot at once. My master's degree and starting a business and kids. And I wore every hat at the staffing agency for a decade, so full stack plus. And I also spent 4 years working for the healthcare vertical at HD Supply, a huge corporation. I'm sure you've seen their trucks out on the roads, or at least you will now that I've said it. Had a really lofty budget dedicated to planning over 500 trade shows every year. So just sheer volume of workload, but really invigorating to me. And of the marketing disciplines, I liked events a lot because you can really see something tangible to fruition. And then fast forward to now, I exited my role at the staffing agency, which had grown into a multi-million-dollar operation. It's still thriving. And I've been the senior growth marketing manager at MD Revolution since 2021, which was my first experience working in health tech. MD Revolution is a software company that helps healthcare organizations create remote care programs, which in 2021 was not my repertoire of subject matter expertise. But looking back, I think I was hired because I came from a background of big and small corporations, and I had that owner's mentality. And I use that a lot in my role now. I use that in how I spend my budget and how we roll up our sleeves. For instance, if we don't have a sales playbook, let's create one. So no day looks the same. I'm still a digital marketer, a project manager, event planner. I think on the flip side of that coin, when you're bogged down with tasks and projects, sometimes you can leave little room for your own professional growth and strategic thinking, and that's kind of where I am at the moment. I've found it a little bit challenging to make that leap from day-to-day managerial to more of a strategic leader. But I'm also very proud of what I'm accomplishing at MD Revolution, and I just have to push myself to carve out time to prioritize myself, which is why I'm here talking to you today.
Wow. Well, this is kind of like everybody's story, right? There's the day-to-day stuff that we have to get done. And then there's the things that we're really trying to do to become a better conductor of our career and our strategy and marketing strategy and so forth. So I applaud you. I think you're doing a great job. Talk a little bit as we get into this. I guess I could have you on here as an event manager as well and tell us a little bit about events, because that's really important, but maybe that's a different episode. So today, talk a little bit about the foundation that an organization needs to have, especially to create a good sales and marketing relationship, number one, and then the foundation that you have to do to actually drive some impact in organizations. Talk a little bit about that, because I know we spent some time building that.
Yeah. At least from my experience, because, all of my experience has been on the job kind of training and learning as I go. But what I've found, I think that personality type is really foundational. When I look for in my colleagues and in contractors, I just look for authenticity and the ability to connect with other people. I also look for people that are just intrinsically motivated, that owner's mentality as well. I also like when I can see that confidence stems from knowledge versus ego. And then also a certain degree of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
I probably sway too far on the empathy spectrum. Like, for example, I find myself feeling bad for ChatGPT when I asked 7 questions in a different way. And I remember that robots don't have feelings. So it's certainly not suggesting that level of empathy, but in marketing and sales enablement, we're essentially following the golden rule, right? We're trying to engage with our audience in the way that we want to be engaged with to get the best result. And so all that being said, I think that small and medium-sized businesses need to invest in finding that best fit from the get-go, because it's a really costly exercise to feel out a new hire, particularly if you have a long sales cycle.
Yeah.
something's not working for 365 days, which is about the length of time I've seen sales reps have a chance to prove themselves. It's a lot of missed opportunity that is directly impacting your revenue growth.
Yeah, that's a long time. Let me ask you a question to help set the context, just for make sure we have kind of a good baseline for our listeners here. Sales enablement, like, just how do you define what that is, or what is it in your terms here?
Well, sales enablement, I look at my number one customer as my sales team and my sales partner. I was thinking of an example. There's a book called If Disney Ran Your Hospital. It's one of my very favorite books. And it has an interesting way of kind of explaining that dynamic that I see in sales enablement. So as an example, a hospital's customer is not actually the patients. The hospital's customers are the doctors. And so they need to keep the doctor satisfied, so then they in turn can care for their customers, which are the patients. And that same vein is sales enablement. Everything I do needs to add value to the sales funnel so that I can keep my internal teams happy.
Oh, that's a really interesting way of looking at it. And that book title sounds intriguing. So then what types of activities do you do that you put under sales enablement? And how would that be different than marketing?
Well, in sales enablement, we're still looking at things like the number of MQLs we've created and conversions to meetings and number of deals created. But it's more important in the sales enablement side to make personal connections and kind of have an ABM kind of strategy with each and every interaction. So it's spending time to find creative ways to just make that connection and move them to the appropriate party to continue that conversation.
Okay. All right. So it's just a very sales focused way of approaching maybe what typically would be thought of as marketing activities, but more in a very sales driven way. Is that, am I hearing it right?
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've was kind of hard for me to come to terms with when I made the shift from more of a marketing focus to teeing up things for my sales team is that there's very much a go ugly, go early mindset when it comes to that type of communication style, which made me so uncomfortable at first. Being okay with typos. And in fact, sometimes typos are encouraged because that makes it look like you're busy. And it's less pressure. So that was hard for me to wrap my head around, that you don't need something aesthetically designed or beautiful all the time, and just speed to conversations.
That one wouldn't be hard for me too. Typos. I
don't think that's the rule set that you want to typo, but I think, the idea that everything doesn't have to be perfect. Maybe that's the way to.
Yeah, I'm the kind of person though that even on my text messages, I can't have a typo. I will go back and fix it. I'll go back and correct it. And if I actually send it, then I'll actually go back and edit it if I can. So I hate those.
Right. You provide that asterisk in the right spelling.
Exactly. Yes. I'll do the asterisk. Oops. Even though it's obviously, you can obviously tell what I meant, but I just have to correct it. Anyways, let's not go down that rabbit hole. Okay. So then when you're trying to when you take this type of shift to this type more of a sales enabled type process, how much of that do you have to explain? Do you have to convey this new approach or to leadership? What was that like if that was an issue?
I think I don't know that my leadership team is defining my role per se as a sales enablement role. I think that it's a lot of crossover and back and forth between true marketing and working with qualified leads to get them ready for the next stage. So, some challenges. So some of the many challenges we know are expected in advance from the marketing side. So for example, like paid ads, we know that it takes a certain level of spend and time for Google to learn and produce high quality leads. And it's not a short-term investment. And then content writing, there's a learning curve for an outside writer to capture the tone of your business, let alone the nuances of your business. So it's like mission critical to use your experience and data driven insights to communicate to the leadership team, like how long initiatives will take to execute, how much it should cost, when and what returns to expect. So, and I think that when the ROI will be realized component is probably more important than anything else, because after the fact, you can explain, why did we perform higher or lower than what we expected? But having a ballpark of timing is really important to create that trust in leadership that your processes are working. And it's also important to convey to leadership, like, what's at stake if an action is not taken. Like, for instance, in my business, I see a pattern. If we're not creating new content, we'll probably see the dip in our pipeline about 3 months out. And that's imperative to convey to leadership in order to make your processes succeed. I think that it's also important to inform your leadership team and work with your leadership team to let them know that there does need to be active participation from them, particularly for subject matter expertise and their role in account-based marketing, and sometimes getting in front of a camera to represent the company and the vision. So it's not just one person's role to enable sales. It's the village.
Yeah, I used to have a boss that said selling is a team sport. So I really like that philosophy of the way of thinking. Yeah, because everyone does need to get involved in it. So that's great.
Yeah. I think buy-in and active participation are both key for the long term.
Yeah.
Hey, Haley, in an organization, the people who catch the lead, right? The people who are actually the first line of defense, if you will, right? From that sales side are really important. Yet they're kind of usually the most inexperienced people in the organization. What do you think about that, and how do you get past that? We've had that experience, right? When you're like cringing over an answer or something like that, right? What do you think organizations should think about in that context?
That is a great question. I think that this is one of the most valuable but often overlooked investments you could make in your company's success. Particularly like when your products and services are high value. It's imperative to have like processes in place, and you invest time in training, and I think making sure that your frontline team members just understand the why in what we're doing. And I also think when SDRs or any frontline employee for that matter, if they're not fully knowledgeable about your offering, it makes sense that there's a lot of room to overpromise. And pretty quickly that can cause problems if you're lucky enough to close and then now someone else has to deliver. I'm uniquely fortunate right now. However, our head of sales also oversees client services. So what is said in the sales process has to happen when they become a customer. But most businesses don't really have that luxury.
I love that perspective because, right, when you're selling something on the front end and then you have to deliver it on the back end, they definitely have to match. So, and usually that inexpensive or that inexperienced person on the front end doesn't have all that business knowledge, right? So they're in a space where they're having to answer some questions, but may not have all the data that they need.
Yeah, and to be clear, and you mentioned it, like we're talking about the SDR or BDR function, right? That often happens. So in how have you used that role? Do you hire out for that role? Like do you hire an external agency to do that? Do you hire them directly and manage them? A lot of the key to making that successful, I've seen that, or at least through my experience, is that you have to have a really good management function over that process, for the exact reason that these are often young, inexperienced. So they need a lot of like day-to-day oversight. How do you approach that, or how have you approached it?
My experience has been hiring them directly as full-time employees. But I think that an area for improvement probably would be to spend more time investing in their training versus just in onboard. But that's not always possible. We're all moving at the speed of light to get things done, and training is a big investment of time.
Yeah. One would argue so is hiring someone, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then maybe that's why, I see a lot of sales team members make it past that 90-day kind of evaluation mark and go a little longer to prove themselves. But like I said, that gets very costly very fast if they're ineffective.
Right. Let's talk about the other component. So, there's good practices that you can have in the business, but there's also what I call the care factor, right? The care quotient. And I have seen you in action personally, pretty impressive. In fact, I'll tell a quick story. And, you were attending a webinar and you actually captured a lot of the leads from the webinar and thinking about how you can reconnect with those folks, which I think is such a great example of rolling up your sleeves and the care factor. Talk about how that's important in someone that you bring on board.
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of those things really can't be taught. It's about the hiring, it's spending the time to hire appropriately kind of factor, someone that's a really great fit from the get-go. Personally, I think there's a lot of value in the details and being able to kind of quickly discern what's important from within what you know about a potential customer. Unfortunately, that's not the most scalable solution. But for me, half of my job is creating, marketing automations and processes that work for others. And then the other half is kind of digging into those details and finding some conversation starters from things that our prospects say or actions they take. And every interaction for me is a challenge to find something that resonates. And it's fun too to look for commonalities. And then when it works, I'm excited every single time.
That's a good balance. It seems like you provide a good balance. So that's a good thing. So you mentioned in the beginning that you've had experience both at much larger companies and then now kind of or now at a smaller size company. What's your take on just, starting up or spinning up a little bit more focus on sales enablement? Are there things that now that you've gone through it or you've been going through it, if you were to give some tips to someone who said, okay, I need to try to do a little bit more of this, what would you say to them or advice you'd give to them about how to make this successful?
Well, two things. And one I touched on before, I spending the time hiring somebody that culturally fits and has that right personality type for their particular role is super important. And I think it's also important to invest in tools that make your team the most effective. I think that sales enablement is as much or more of an art as it is a science. So having the tools to free up your time for free thinking and creative approaches is really important. And making sure that the people that you hire as well, like you as an employer knows what makes them feel successful. I'm very communicative with my leadership team with what makes me feel successful. And it's when I'm supported with tools, I'm fairly rewarded and appropriately recognized. And I think a lot of other people can probably get behind that too.
First of all, everybody deserves a little recognition. Everybody deserves, that's good business practices for sure, right? Talk about, what you just talked about was it's not all done in a vacuum. And, certainly sales enablement is a means, to, making sure the sale happens, but there's other things in terms of marketing that are at play. And yeah, we're talking about sales enablement today, but a lot of things around that can help make that job easier, right? Like other marketing activities, email, high value content, video, webinars, events, and those kinds of things. Talk about how important that is and how maybe we shouldn't just think, this is a one and done and isolated idea.
Well, first I'll briefly touch on events just because they've been such a huge part of my background. But I do think that post-COVID, people are still yearning for more of that in-person connection. And they're still ready to soak up information and make decisions. So I think that events have really reinvigorated over the last few years. And it's really important for our salespeople to be out in the market and hearing what really matters to our prospects and seeing, what our competitors are doing. So that's just one piece. and now I'm done. But I I think in the year time frame that I was almost a year, I had the honor of working with you. We proved that constant marketing activity and new content creation has value. Um, we have about a month left, right? Yeah, of 2024, and already my business has seen 218% revenue growth year over year. Um, yeah, that's an insane leap, and it was not by accident. We kept the pipeline full because we had this multi-channel approach to a real clearly defined target audience. Um, what I've also found in content marketing and the various channels is that in my business, particularly when your audience is extremely busy, so in my case, we're working with healthcare practitioners. Um, it takes precise timing to get their attention, and it has to be high value content. Um, with my audience, content has to be newsworthy, and there also needs to be some sort of financial implication associated with it for them to stop and take a look. People will stop for a buck, and not many are immune from that. So that's the type of content that's been successful for us.
I want to go back to ask you something. You mentioned that having the right tools is important to make this work well, right? So what are some examples of the tools that you're talking about there? Not necessarily by name, just the types.
Well, we're at the year mark for our migration to HubSpot. And by a landslide, HubSpot is the most beneficial tool that I have ever used. I'm a raving fan.
Okay.
Not getting paid to say this. The efficiencies it's created, the reporting elements, they make sure that it doesn't take long for me to prove to the business, how we're doing, give them the snapshot. And then in turn, I can just use the majority of my time to take action and do the things that are leading to that report. And before HubSpot, I really don't think that I had a pulse on my customers' behaviors. And also because I'm a super admin of HubSpot, so I keep it in pristine condition. There's only good going in. So by default, I trust what's in there, and I use that tool for all channels.
Yeah. I'm glad you made that comment. First of all, this isn't a commercial for HubSpot, but an automation tool for sure is great for everyone, especially if you're in that growing side of the business. If you haven't had one, it's kind of like being blind in some ways, right? Especially if you're trying to grow it and you're ready to scale the business, you really need some of that line of sight to make it happen. But beyond that, it's like if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So, having line of sight to this stuff is a measurement tool for us. And Haley, it's not only about getting the tool, it's about making sure it's used and it's kept pristine. So that, I think, is part of the job as well. Any other tools that you think have been kind of important in your success? And let me ask you this question. You talked about HubSpot or automation. What decisions have you made differently based on the information that you've gotten to help you drive the business?
So with HubSpot particularly, there was a time pre-HubSpot, a couple CRMs ago, where we couldn't be picky with the revenue opportunities that walked in the door. We just had to run with it, and really long term that's problematic because, like we discussed before, once you acquire that new customer, it's your implementation and your account managers that have to now work with a higher volume of low quality pieces of business, and that's a big burden, and it can cause resentment between your departments, and then what do you have left? So I feel like the efficiencies and the insights that HubSpot has afforded us has really gotten us to the point where we can be picky again. And then on top of HubSpot, human capital. But we can now be more successful or selective rather with who we partner with. And it's not so much of a risk to pursue the bigger opportunities that have longer sales cycle. because our time is freed up, and the return that we've seen from that shift is tremendous. Like for example, our largest closed deal in 2024 this year is 7 times the size of our largest close in 2023.
Oh, wow.
And that's not an outlier. It's a pattern. So,
wow, that's amazing.
So that's a great testimonial. So someone from HubSpot would be dying to get that. Are you saying that because of the quality of the information you have, you're able to focus your efforts more and then therefore achieve higher value?
Yeah, and understanding behaviors as well. So I can see which pieces of content they've absorbed on our site before they make the leap to contact us. I understand what links they're clicking, and more about their organization as well, as far as the kind of organizational structure and so the large health systems.
Right. Yeah. Sales cycle timing, customer segmentation refinement, right? Engagement understanding. All those things are much sharper now, right?
Sharper. Yep.
Yeah, that's great. It strikes me as I hear you talking about this, like, I have to admit, so I thought, to me, the term sales enablement typically, in my view, has meant things more like the practical work that needs to do to often support the sales team or enable them. So like it involves like sales training. I don't know. Do you ever do sales? Do you incorporate sales training in anything what you're doing? Like, skills training and that type of stuff? Is that included in what you do now too?
It will be. We're actively building our sales playbook now, and that includes kind of scripting and that training to practice that scripting, and templates to help learn, but not necessarily utilize. Because when a lead of such high value is going to fall in the hands of a sales rep, those need to be personalized conversations, and template's not going to fit. So we're building that out now, and extensive training on what our competitors are doing and what are those objections that they can use real time if they've come from a different organization, they had a bad experience or a positive one, and what are our rebuttals. So my role is building that out, and it will be a living kind of breathing training program.
Love it. Well, if you think about it, right, sales enablement, whether it's in the sales department or the marketing department, is marketing, touch points, training, conversations in service of sales, right? And most marketing organizations, guess what, are in service of sales. So to me, this is kind of like the conversation that you and I have had before, Alec, which is, what's ABM? It's just good marketing, right?
Yeah.
And I think sales enablement is that as well sometimes.
Yeah, it's just really good marketing, because you definitely don't want the old saying of, just throw the lead over the wall. Right. That doesn't work. You have to really function as a seamless unit.
Awesome. Yeah. Haley, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to ask you one last kind of thing. If you're a small business, we talked about this. So some of our businesses are pretty small. Top 2 or 3 things that you would recommend for sharpening your sales enablement and making sure it starts to hum.
You can only say 2 or 3.
Top 3. I heard you say HubSpot or get an automation tool, right?
Yeah. Well, the good news is that, depending on this product or service that you're selling, you don't have to have a massive team of full-time employees to accomplish big things. You can have a skeleton crew of the right people, and I think you'll go far. You just also need to fairly reward them and invest in what will help them be successful with tools that offers a lot of utility. So I think that if you front load your efforts on finding the personality types that will fit the role in your business, and then you don't risk losing your intellectual capital once you have it, you're in a really great shape. And I think as long as your leadership team continues to have that kind of roll up your sleeves mentality and participate in the processes, that's what's going to keep it rolling.
Awesome.
I like it.
Haley, thanks for being with us. And if people want to ask you some questions or get a hold of you, where should they reach you at?
They could reach me on LinkedIn. I can share that after the recording, or feel free to email me anytime.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Haley.
Thank you.